This is an episode that I think is best described as something that left me pleasantly surprised. Now, I knew it would be a good episode, but I truly thought that March was going to die in this episode. I mean, it just said to me that all the signs were pointing towards death, that this was an orb that didn't know what it was to protect. It's still having trouble eating by itself, right? I mean, every time it went up against this giant beast, it was killed how many times? To me, it felt like we were going to follow a familiar pattern for at least a little while, that all the characters that impact this orb's life, from the boy wanting to see his family and friends to a girl who wants to grow up to be a mom, that he would have to experience death, and that over time it would build a character that maybe then could start protecting and keeping those close to him safe. But this episode left me pleasantly surprised. It was still, I would argue, just as emotional as even the first episode, just in a different way. I feel like often authors get into the habit of saying sad things are going to be death, that a character will lose something, and sure, if you write it well enough, episode 1 as an example, you can really hit us with those quote-unquote feels. But to have a girl who came so close to death, who gave up on everything, sisters wanting to protect her little sis, and we end in a situation where they still have to abandon their friends and family. It's sad to think about it in that way, but there's a hope for survival, but still a lingering threat that any one of them could be destroyed. If you watch the preview, it seems like they're very much curious about the immortality that this orb possesses. There's still going to be a lot of heartbreak, but what this episode means is that it isn't as predictable as we probably assumed. I spoke to so many people last week and we're all pretty much in agreement. She was going to get 8. There just felt like there was no way. I mean, if an orb is struggling to eat by itself, it can't function and think of the idea of climbing a tree to get some fruit, how is it going to protect a girl? We know it could be ridiculously strong, but seemingly it was now in the form of the boy. And it didn't even cross my mind that an orb that can evolve could also switch back to its previous forms, and seemingly that's exactly what's going to continue to happen. That all the forms that it takes, it probably will be able to go back and forth. We see in the preview that he does go back to his human body form, so it seems like right now his offensive form will be the wolf, and his general day-to-day form and probably his natural face will be that of the boy from episode 1, which is a really interesting formula, especially considering that within the battle against the giant bear, it probably evolved miniaturely like 3 or 4 times by getting tougher and tougher fur and becoming a more vicious creature. I mean, we started out as a docile wolf who really was just tamed by a human to now something that can take down a giant-ass bear. It's definitely night and day, and I'm going to be curious to see if it will only be those 2 forms or if over time, there'll be different things that will impact it and allow it to change or something like that. But I would be perfectly content just having a human in wolf form, and over time the wolf evolves more and more and more into maybe a more vicious and powerful creature, as the human form just learns more things like speech and just general human emotions. We see at the end of the episode in a very creepy way. Thank you. And I'm hoping it's going to take a good while for him to properly speak. I mean, I think saying thank you in that moment was perfectly fine, and honestly kind of gave you that good oomph factor, the way to just finish off an episode showing that clearly that this girl, for better or worse, is this orb's mother. It feels crystal clear at that point, makes you even more connected to her dream of being a mom. She was playing around this orb, she fully admitted to that, she knew it was fake, but honestly it feels like at this point that connection to the orb means more than anything, right? To watch the episode take place and to watch this ritual just feel like it's going to happen one way or another. At first, when they were originally leaving after having her tied up, it felt to me like, oh, they weren't even going to watch. If that's the case, they could easily save her. Maybe something like that would happen. And then I realized shortly after, no, they were just going to watch from above, more than likely. And even if they did leave, there was probably no way to save her, which gave me even more reason to believe that she would end up dead in this episode. I mean, the older sister got lucky more times than I can count. Not only was she tied to a tree about to be slapped to oblivion, she got out of there in the nick of time with this really creative way of getting the knife from her boot, to then literally falling from a giant cliff. If it wasn't for the branches, she easily would have died. Surprised her back didn't break, to then once again getting hit by this bear. And I'm like, holy shit, if a cat has 9 lives, this girl's clearly on her last few by the looks of it. It just felt to me that this episode gives me even more hope for the future of this story, because it was crystal clear that this would be a tearjerker anime, but I firmly believe the tearjerker factor would simply be on just characters' deaths, and I'm sure there will be plenty of deaths throughout the story. But it's interesting how they understand that just because an arc is, say, 2 episodes or 3 episodes, doesn't mean we have to end it with a death or end it with a death in a way that we're expecting. I feel like most of us probably assumed the ritual would end up with a little girl being dead, and the orb have to learning once again what pain means, and pain promotes growth. It was a big theme of last week's episode. But to see the new possibilities that are taking place, I mean, there are so many ways for this to get even more twisted, and honestly, for a character, this woman behind the ritual saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna give you guys a shot. I'll kill you here and now, or you can come with me and we'll say it was a success. She went from a character who I was hoping the bear would rip her head off, because out of everything we've seen, she's just following the ritual, right? Following these old school tribes, but any clan that sacrifices people for a quote-unquote god can go eat shit. That's the simplest way to put it, right? But the fact that she has seen something here with the orb and it's triggered even more spirituality with her, even though I don't like her on a personal level, I'm very intrigued by her character, and that's what you want to see. You don't have to make us love characters, you just have to make us intrigued by them, and that's exactly what this episode did. It just felt like it was unique, it was different, and if anything, the best praise I can give it, it makes future episodes not as predictable as we probably assumed they were going to be. Little girl gonna be a sacrifice, we know the death flag. We have old man helping orb, right? You know, we know where that's going to go. Now we're saying, okay, even if they do end up dead, it's a lot harder now to predict, because if there was any chance of someone dying, a ritual where you're going to get eaten by a bear is probably the best place to do so. So now the future has a lot more branches that have me very intrigued. The orb's character development is fantastic. I love Silent Wanderers. I mentioned last week the Dororo vibes. I mean, I love that show, loving it here and how they're using it. To Your Eternity is definitely masterclass, and goddamn, the musical score is so well done. The little instrumentals and sound effects that are applied, it gives you this very interesting nature feel while invoking so many complex emotions. I mean, when they were tying this girl down to the slab of rock to be a sacrifice on this bed of flowers, that was a painful song because it felt like it was supposed to be a mixture of fear but also slight spirituality, like kind of invoking that sort of feeling, and it was such a powerful episode. Directing on point, the camera was great, and the musical score I still think is one of the all-stars of this production. And honestly, the way the orb actually spoke, I'm glad that there's more than one anime that can understand that if a character is going to speak for essentially the first time, it shouldn't sound normal, it shouldn't sound fluent, it should sound like a monster trying to form human speech, and that's exactly what it did. And it'll be very interesting to see the evolution in terms of how the speech will happen, and if it's going to be able to learn words like a normal human would, or if it's going to learn words based on very complex things happening. A mother feeding her son, so to speak, right? The words thank you make sense on why you would grow to understand and appreciate those words, especially considering she was trying to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how the human speech will kind of evolve, and I hope it will be more of a slower growth. Even if it's not going to be the end of the world. I just love the kind of slow burn to see how essentially an object becomes a human. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Where do you think it might go next week? And did this episode shock you like it did for me? If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share, support, and hit that subscribe button if you're happy new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.